Once upon a time, there was a kind fisherman. He lived in a tiny hut by the blue sea with his wife. Every day, the fisherman would go out on his boat to catch fish. "Fisherman, every day I go out on my boat, hoping to catch enough fish for a good meal." The fisherman's wife would stay home. She cleaned their little hut and cooked their meals. Sometimes she would sit by the window and watch the waves crash against the shore. Fisherman's wife: I often sit by the window, watching the waves and waiting for my husband's return. One sunny morning, the fisherman went fishing as usual. He cast his line into the water and waited patiently. He hoped to catch enough fish to make a good meal for himself and his wife. The sun climbed higher in the sky. The fisherman started to feel tired. He decided to try one last time before going home. "Fisherman, just one more try and then I'll head home." Suddenly, he felt a strong tug on his line. He pulled and pulled with all his might. Finally, he pulled out a fish unlike any he had ever seen. It was a beautiful fish with scales that shimmered like gold. "Magic fish, please let me go. I am a magical fish. I can grant you any wish you desire." The fisherman was astonished. He had never seen a talking fish before. He thought of his wife and how happy she would be. But then he remembered how content she was with their simple life. "Fisherman, I don't need any wishes. You are free to go." And with that, he gently placed the magical fish back into the sea and watched it swim away. When the fisherman returned home, he told his wife about the magical fish. Instead of being pleased, the fisherman's wife became upset. "Fisherman's wife, you should have asked for a wish. Our hut is so small and cramped. Ask the fish for a bigger house." The fisherman didn't want to bother the magical fish again, but his wife insisted, so the fisherman went back to the sea and called out to the fish. "Fisherman, magical fish, my wife wishes for a bigger house." "Magic fish, what is your wish?" "Fisherman, my wife wishes for a bigger house." "Magic fish, it shall be granted." And with that, the magical fish granted the wish. When the fisherman returned home, he was amazed to see a grand house in place of his tiny hut.
"Wow, this is incredible."
His wife was overjoyed. She ran from room to room admiring their new belongings.
"Oh, look at this and this. It's all so beautiful."
But their happiness did not last long. A few days later, the fisherman's wife began to complain again.
"This house is nice, but I would be even happier if we had a beautiful palace fit for a queen."
Once again, the fisherman went back to the sea and called out to the magical fish. He told the fish about his wife's wish for a palace.
"Oh, magical fish, my wife now wishes for a palace."
"It shall be granted,"
said the magical fish, shaking its head. And just like that, the grand house transformed into a magnificent palace. The fisherman's wife was surrounded by servants and luxurious things, but she still wasn't content. Day after day, she demanded more wishes.
"I wish to be the ruler of the land."
Then she wished to be the ruler of the sun and the moon.
"I wish to be the ruler of the sun and the moon."
Each time, the fisherman pleaded with the magical fish, who granted the wishes with a heavy heart.
"Please, magical fish, grant my wife's wish."
"It shall be granted."
The fisherman became very worried. The sea grew stormy and dark, reflecting the magical fish's growing anger. He tried to talk to his wife to explain that true happiness didn't come from possessions.
"My dear, true happiness doesn't come from all these things."
But she wouldn't listen. Finally, the fisherman's wife demanded to be the master of the universe. The fisherman went to the sea one last time. The once shimmering fish was now dark and gray.
"Your wife's greed knows no bounds. She has learned nothing. I will grant you one last wish."
The fisherman closed his eyes and wished for everything to go back to the way it was. When he opened his eyes, he was standing in front of his tiny hut. His wife stood beside him. They were back to being poor, but they were happy. The fisherman's wife had learned a valuable lesson about the dangers of greed. She realized that true happiness came from being content with what they had. And so, the fisherman and his wife lived simply and happily ever after. They learned that the greatest treasures in life were not things, but love, gratitude, and contentment. S2, I understand now. True happiness comes from being content with what we have.